Hey all you Bonsai Time Podcast listeners, this is your host Kevin, coming at you with some new episode release. I know it's been a while, but we got something special for you. This interview will be released in a 3-part series, meaning that this month we'll have 3 episodes released with a continuation of each episode. So stay tuned and find out more about our guest, Dennis Makashima, learning about his journey in bonsai, his life, and his experience overall. We look forward to hearing what you have to think, say, feel, all the above about this episode and the way we're releasing it. And feel free to comment or like or subscribe. Remember, stay tuned and bonsai on.
Hey, my name is Dennis Makashima. I'm yesterday's news in bonsai, but that's all right. And I appreciate the opportunity to spew a few pearls of wisdom for the Bonsai Podcast here. I'm at El Cerrito, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay.
Which is across the bay from San Francisco.
Okay.
But thank you for the opportunity. And, my first and last podcast, I believe.
No problem.
We'll see about that.
How have you been? How's California?
Yeah, it's about 70 degrees, and it's having a good time, good life, staying healthy. Just got back from LA, and I know you're going to Japan pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm leaving this weekend. My wife and daughter are already over there. They'll be there for 3 months, so it'll be a good amount of time over there. I'm going there till June 10th. We're doing a traditional wedding ceremony, Buddhist Shinto, in the family shrine, and then we're celebrating my daughter's first birthday on the 31st of this month. So it went by pretty quick for her to be 1 year old already. It was really fast.
Smart planning. You're not there in July, August when it's hot and muggy. So
Yeah, I was very fortunate. Although Ohio does have its days where it's like 80% humidity. Nothing like Japan, though. I hear it's pretty crazy out there as far as 100 degrees and 100% humidity. I was like, yeah.
It's a different culture because when I apprenticed there, you can't go in your tank top and your
Right.
shorts, and you have to kind of dress appropriately as an apprentice. So it's about 3 pairs of clothes every day when we worked on the road.
Oof, you're just swimming through all that sweat, huh?
You got to be presentable,
Yeah.
I've been to Hawaii 35 times, and it's just a matter of casuals in, and that's my kind of.
Right.
I like that kind of weather.
No, it's same. There's where my wife is from. She's from Fukushima, so it's within the mountain range that she's at. It's pretty laid back, I would say. They call it countryside, but it's some big-ish, medium-sized town.
Were they immediately affected by the tsunami and earthquake?
No, fortunately, that part of Fukushima was coastal. She's more central in Aizu-Wakamatsu, and she's surrounded by mountains, so they were safe enough. I mean, they felt the earthquake and stuff, but they weren't affected by the nuclear or anything because that all went south towards Tokyo and through the wind stream and everything that way. So fortunately, they were okay. But it's always on their minds that happened so close to home because it was about, I think, 4 hours away from the site, 4 or 5. But with their high range of altitude and things, it didn't really hit them because of where the wind stream, like I was saying, went to. So
I went to the World Bonsai Convention in Saitama, but the person that's a friend of mine, he take on me taxes. He's really a Renaissance woman and prominent in American and Japanese bonsai. She insisted my wife and I attend the convention and sightsee with she and her family, and lo and behold, she paid for everything, and you can't argue with these Japanese women. So
I
had to wait. Then again, it was first class airplane tickets and convention, all the hotels, and then she lived in that area that your wife's family's from. And so we visited the Tohoku area quite a bit.
It's beautiful up there, especially during the spring. This was my first time going in June. I went to Japan back many years ago in April, was there for the whole month of April. That was wonderful. I went in December this last year to celebrate Christmas with the family and New Year's. And that was a nice experience. A lot of snow up there. It's very cold. Not much different than Ohio, but enough to be a difference of the house. As you know, they're built kind of older, and my in-laws house is about 30 years old. So it's very drafty. And it was Interesting. No central heating and stuff, so it's kind of funny.
Yeah, but I when I trained in Japan, that's kind of the same thing. And
right.
I went to 2 Kokufutan shows in February, but that's a little bit too cold. And
right.
But I did go 3 springs and 3 falls and one winter.
You study with Mitsuya, right?
Yes, Yasuo from Toyohashi.
Because that was the same teacher as Kathy Chainer?
That's correct. She preceded me by 6 months.
Oh, really? Okay.
We were there at the same time. She's a very talented woman and consider my senpai. She was, but after a while, you all got your own little responsibilities. And other than the fact that I was the lowest one, so if there was any seating for 2 or 3 people in a client's little workshop area, then it was the client, Mitsuya and Kathy, and then I was outside.
Doing your duties and serving everything else, right?
That's correct. But it's part of paying your dues and part of being an apprentice. And
yeah, that's an interesting aspect of life that I've talked to my wife about in regards to the cultural identity of it, and also just being from that culture as she is, but then my interpretation of it will be different. In example, we took pictures this last time in December. I had completely different pictures of like someone who's not from the country. And then she had some that were of just like the nature and things. She's like, your pictures are so different. And that made me think and talk to her about, well, it's the same aspect of trying to be a deshi comparatively to not having that in our culture. There is an apprenticeship model in construction, but that's really not a thing anymore either. It's like,
I did feel, though I was treated very well, almost like the lowest thing on earth as an apprentice. And some of the things that emphasized to me, if you're carrying a 80-pound tree, it's a macho thing in Japan, like 80 pounds is one person. Here we might have 2 people carrying it.
Right.
And when it's 125 pounds, 2 people carry it there and 4 people carry it here. But it was always, I had contact with Daiju-en, which is our mother organization. It was in Okazaki City. Suzuki Todo is the current proprietor there. But it's always emphasized, if you fall, that tree better land on you.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of money involved with that. And
that's a valuable pot and valuable trees. So, okay, that puts things in perspective. And
right.
But
and I mean that lets you know where you stand too, right?
Oh yeah, I grew up in Berkeley, California, right in the 60s.
Okay.
I used to personal liberties and say what I got to say.
Right.
Being in Japan was definitely a foreign country. I can't speak Japanese nor understand it. And what little Japanese I knew was from my mother, who learned from her parents, and that's Meiji era Japanese. So
right. That's very words,
people say in Japan we don't even say those words anymore.
Right.
Wow. I went there and I didn't know my instructor, so I introduced myself and I said Makashima, and then he said, "You don't pronounce your name right. You got to say it kind of in a monotone way. You can't go up and down." Here Japanese Americans, we say everything. If you want, it's like New Orleans English or something.
Right, that Creole a little bit,
Yeah, so I just learned from there. I said, just keep my mouth shut.
And head down and go to work.
Work hard. Stay out of trouble.
Right. Oh, hey Ryan, can you
hear
us?
Yes, and you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dennis,
nice to meet
this
you.
is Ryan, my co-host. We're very thankful for your time today that you've given us graciously.
You have a little bench in Redwood Forest. Oh, nice.
Yeah, I changed it for you. I know that you're in Northern California, so.
Yeah, it's just like, maybe about 30 miles from me, you got the same scene.
Oh, okay.
That's awesome.
Maybe from now on, every time we have a guest, I'll change the background to like their native environment. Maybe we'll try that going forward.
Perfect.
That, rather than, you show me a scene from Sudan or Syria or someplace. Russia.
Normally you have Dan Robinson's garden in your background, right?
Yeah, on my old ones, I had one of Dan's Ponderosa pines that I had taken a picture of when I was apprenticing with him. And so it was always sitting right behind me. But I haven't changed my background in like 2 years. So I think it's time for an update.
Do you still see Dan periodically?
Yeah, so Kevin might have told you I moved here a little over 3 years ago now. to do my graduate school. But I did go back a little over a year ago to help him with some styling of things and some winter maintenance. And then I was trying to go back like once a year, but I'm not sure if I'll get back this year. So maybe next repotting season is the next time that I'll try to go back.
Okay, because Dan and I have a little history. It's
okay.
Well, we were always on the same program, especially in the Pacific Northwest, because the convention people deemed us as diametrically opposed the way we approach bonsai. So they always like to put us together. I always advocate just take your time. It might take us 5 years to get this tree looking like a pseudo bonsai, but no chainsaws or anything. And anyway,
were you present when you first brought the chainsaw out the first time?
Well, I don't know. I don't know when he did, but I've known him for about 40 years. He was one of the earlier pioneers of bonsai on the West Coast, and I started 40 years ago. But I did see him at several California conventions, and then we did bring Kimura, Masahiko Kimura, a couple times, and Dan was always that. When somebody very prominent from Japan would come, then he would be there. Anyway,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
No, Ryan, we were just chit chatting. Dennis discussed a little bit about his apprenticeship, and I figure we can dive more into that. I just wanted to say, give a shout out to Michael Hagedorn and Doyle Saito for getting us into contact with you. And obviously Michael is saying we should, address your experience, and we just really appreciate your time given to us. And we look forward to sharing your experiences and your history with everybody that's into bonsai around the world and to America. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm surprised you asked me, because I'm like yesterday's news,
Well, that's one of our philosophies with our podcast that we choose to look into more deeply, is that if we don't know our history, we won't know where we came from. And so the people that are still within bonsai within this lifetime and are historical figures in that sense of pioneering certain things, and or just being part of a circuit, or just having experience from back when it was getting its roots, so to speak, we feel there's a lot to learn from that, just because we may be doing some similar things that you've already done that you found a better way to do. You know what I mean?
Well, thank you. I've emphasized this effort about tradition and history for at least the last 30 years. But most of the time, you're kind of like talking to yourself. And I would say within the last 10 years, it's I could see the dramatic popularity of so-called contemporary bonsai. I mean, I realize every year there's another contemporary, but right. It's just I would think that it was because of Kimura's influence and work, and superior work. But I grew up in the Japanese American community here in the Bay Area, and I have to some disclaimers. I'm not an expert on the history of bonsai, and I do know a lot. I knew all the old timers, all the old senseis here in California, both Northern California and Southern California. It was part of my mission to meet everybody, take workshops from everybody. But it wasn't like this. I never sat down and interviewed anybody. I don't get that information firsthand. This is what I gleaned from being with these people. And so I'm not making it up. It could be a bunch of BS, but it's based on some logic, some personal experiences. Are you familiar with how bonsai got popular in the United States as a hobby?
Somewhat. I think Kevin and I would probably both.
I know that there's bonsais that existed in like the Brooklyn Botanical Garden, and there's some wealthy people that had bonsais at the turn of the century. But I consider that just like wealthy people's ornamentation, as opposed to a public hobby. And my feeling is it started like in 1950 in California. And I realize someone in Idaho or somebody else may doubt that. It was very popular here since like from 1955 on, as to the masses here. That's why I say Japanese American things, because it's kind of a outgrowth of the Japanese American internment in World War II.
Right.
Being imprisoned, you lose everything. Back in these, you couldn't get a job. So my parents are typical of the typical story. Now, they were interned. They were in Gila, Arizona, I'm not sure if it was a Navajo reservation, but it was an Indian reservation. It was on the desert. And then my father, when my parents came back, they first went to Colorado because they were afraid to come back to California.
Okay.
Because that's where they were, they lost everything. But they couldn't have it as farmers in Colorado, so they came to California, back to California. And all the men, I mean, just as a big general statement, were they were relegated to being gardeners, or work in the floral industry, or nursery trade, produce.
Yeah.
And all of our mothers were housekeepers. And you look at it today, the typical immigration pattern, you're a maintenance gardener or you're a house cleaner.
Right.
Everybody, all the guys, since they work with plants and they had no money, so like in 1940, basically in 1950, they start from seed.
Okay.
A nursery and body because they needed to feed the family. So pine seeds and maple seeds were really prevalent. And that dominated the early era of bonsai here. So, I mean, I had a collection, quite extensive one, and I had at least 100 of these legacy trees. In 1950, these people started, that's how they started. They kept them alive for 70 years. But at the same time, it was done through just the crudest horticultural practices, like rusty nails for iron, kits for fermenting fish emulsion, use eggshells for calcium, and
But then the interesting thing with that, not to interrupt, is just it still kept them growing. Like they still maintained them, which is
that's
amazing.
I used to teach at a place called Merritt College in Oakland in the horticulture department. And my career was as an aesthetic pruner, which is I specialize in small scale trees in an urban environment, but with not only horticulture or arboriculture, but aesthetics also. So I took, I started that 40 years ago, and I started my bonsai training 40 years ago by luck. So I didn't use bonsai techniques to dwarf a tree. People didn't want little tiny 1 foot, 3 foot trees in their yard. But to keep it in scale, like a 1-story building, 15 feet tall. But I used the aesthetics of what I learned in bonsai. So depth of field, proportion, scale, negative space. Well, it sounded good. My clients believed all that, and I was in business. But anyway, these old trees, I was a teacher, and a lot of the professors there had PhDs, in soils engineering or nutrition, and they couldn't keep a plant alive for 3 months. Old timers, no formal education, and they kept alive for 70 years. So I said, I know which way I'm going.
Right. Method to their madness and magic, right?
Yeah, but I have, I wrote down a lot of things that I thought was the like the intent or the philosophy of the old timers. And it's just my interpretation, so I can't say this is the truth. How I view these things, and the term I came up with was benign neglect. So these old timers, they're working like crazy, and in fact, my father, he worked himself to death. He died in 1955. So.
Okay.
And my mom was, mother of 4, and she loses her husband. He was a gardener, and he got sick, like maybe the flu.
Okay. He
had to keep working, then it turned into pneumonia, then he kept growing, and then eventually turned into things like meningitis and just like that. Family friends came to grammar school, picked me up and said, father is dying, and you need to come home. But from that point on, I grew up in that environment where there was all, like in South Berkeley, it was a big congregation of Japanese Americans. It's, Berkeley being a liberal town, but not, and then it was I grew up in an all Black community. It was a poor area, but, blue collar. And like there's 6 churches, all within about a mile radius of each other. There's 3 Christian and 3 Buddhist churches.
Wow.
So when people came back from internment, there was a church in Berkeley called the Higashi Honganji Church. All the old time gardeners were there, and then they started their own club, the Fuji Bonsai Club, and became very prominent here in Northern California. It's reputed to be one of the oldest. There's about 3 or 4 clubs in California that try to date the history back to 1950, which makes them the oldest club in California, which basically makes them the oldest club in the United States.
I've heard that, yeah.
You need documentation. No one had documentation. I've seen documentation like in 1952 or something like that, but to get back to 1950, then that makes you the king.
Right.
You were the first. John
King of the
Knox
hill.
Club, the California Bonsai Society. There's club in Sacramento that used to be from 1950, and the one in Berkeley. But all the old masters were there. Have you heard of a man named Home Isayama?
I have not. Ryan, have you?
Never.
Just a Renaissance man. I mean, I think he was associated with UC Berkeley, but he was just a tremendous artist. There's a book, if you ever get it, called Gaman, Gaman, and it's about art being produced in the camps.
Okay.
So two of Home Isayama's things, they're like an inkwell, but made out of shale or slate or something. This is beautiful work, and he made his own tools.
Wow.
And then when the Fuji Bonsai Club first started, it was like maybe 10 really prominent bonsai people here, and then they wanted Home Isayama to be their first sensei. So he was, but I never got to meet him personally. But as a tree pruner, I worked on this garden. After he died, but his wife was still there. So it's just, it's been my pleasure to hang around some of these old timers that one of a kind, just like John Maka. If you ever knew him, and wow, those guys.
I wish I could have met him. I know he passed away in, I think, early thousands, due to him in old age and things. And then the stories I've heard, from, Ryan and I have a mutual friend, Chase Rosade. He's up in New Hope, Pennsylvania. I think we discussed his name when I talked to him on the phone the first time. He's told us stories about John and UG and all these people. And he actually said that he recalls, if his memory is correct when he said this, what he told me, he's like, if my memory is correct, I think I did a class with Dennis before, and I think it was in Ohio. And if I heard you correctly, and I made a note of it, you said you did some work in Hudson, Ohio back in the day. What was that like? Because we're now in the bonsai scene in Ohio. I'm originally from Oregon. Ryan's from here in Columbus originally, and studied in Seattle with Dan and things. And then I moved here in 2018 with my wife and all that. And what was your experience like in Ohio at the time with that?
It was actually a great time. I actually I was on the program at Russell's Bonsai Nursery.
Oh, wow. That's
all
awesome.
around Mississippi. This guy in the audience, he had at that time it was the Cleveland Indians, but he was a baseball fan. And, he had the cap, and then I was on stage, and he kept asking me questions on pine, on Japanese black pine. And even though they don't do well in a real cold climate, he's an expert on Ponderosa, but he was inquisitive about Japanese black pine. So let's meet after, we talk. And we talked for like a couple of days. And then he invited me out. He lived in Hudson, Ohio. His name was Greg Cloyd.
Okay.
And, we, for 2 straight sessions, I went out there twice. So it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we just talked about Japanese black pine.
Oh, wow.
Pine theory. That interested, and then he actually took those sessions and my words and put out this little thing about 80 pages long on pine theory.
Wow.
I combined it with my bonsai experience, like training in Japan. I traveled to Hawaii 35 times, and how Japanese black pine grow in a tropical area.
Oh, wow.
And here in California, as an ornamental tree pruner, a lot of Japanese gardens fall in that category. And work on about 1,000 Japanese black pine landscape trees, along with 1,000 bonsai pines. And, I made my own theory of it.
Right.
It could be a lot of falsehoods. I don't know, but I just took, what I consider maybe I had like a test. I had a control group.
I was gonna say you had a lot of test subjects, right?
I did. Of course, my clients, my tree pruning customers were without them knowing it, they were the sacrificial trees.
Undisclosed.
But I went around the United States and I asked everybody, tell me something about what you know about pines. But it has a different concept of decandling or when to prune what. There are nuances of microclimates, and there's a difference between a pine in a pot and a pine in the ground. And even in there's microclimates in Ohio. You could be in a sheltered place or a place that's really cold to get close to the Great Lakes. But I went out to Hudson, and it was like he put my words into something almost intelligent.
He really paid attention.
He was a guy that could do anything. I mean, it was like the last cut before Olympic trials in cycling, and he did this, he did that. And but what I really liked about Hudson, Ohio, is there were several things that happened. One was this, I don't know, once every 15 years, there's some cicadas coming out of the grounds.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
gross, how it's
Yeah.
all these things. But and then he took me down to the town, a little, really a small village kind of thing, and they found a drugstore from the like a 150-year-old drugstore, but they had a soda fountain.
Oh, nice.
That was wonderful, man. I just love these things, milkshakes and that I live for that kind of stuff. So, hey, he said, "You want to go down?" I said, "Sure." He took me to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, and
Nice.
we were supposed to go to a Akron Zips. I think it was a baseball game. I think they were baseball, and we were supposed to go there. And but before he lined up this kind of a friend of his that did a peace ceremony thing. But she was kind of long-winded, We wanted to go, but we protocol courtesy, we'll stay. So we missed the game, so I didn't go to that.
Okay.
But that's how I wound up in Hudson. But I did go to the Cleveland Bonsai Society. And
so at that time, you said that you got to Hudson because you were on a demonstration for Brussels Bonsai.
Yeah.
So what led you to the point in your career where you were demonstrating? I guess, how did you kind of get started?
Okay, I shouldn't be telling anybody publicly, but I took 40 years ago. I took 5 lessons from this man named Masi Mizumi. He was a bonsai master here. He lived in Berkeley, almost like maybe a mile away from me. And I knew his son, so I kind of knew Mas, but it just so happened that it was a family function, my wife's side, and his son married my wife's cousin, so we were at the same family function. And how things work. I was in the kitchen. You go right down the hallway, you go to the bathroom, and I had to go to the bathroom. But instead of going down the hallway, for some reason, I took the circuitous route. I went all the way around. I went to the living room to get to the bathroom. And Moss was talking to these old timers about bonsai, and I had just started my tree pruning career. So, sounds interesting. So I took his lessons, and lo and behold, there was a little community place near me that had an Asian cultural fair. They needed somebody to do bonsai. Well, I would be the least one you would want to consider to do a talk or demonstration, but the person that recommended me, she was a floor arrangement person, a family friend. So, all right, I logically deduced that the audience got to be dumber than me, and I just regurgitated my, the informal upright style. I had a juniper, and I explained the nuances of the style and put the training wire for the trunk to be bent. Well, that was it. That was my first demo, my first year, 40 years ago. And from that point on, I didn't lobby for these things. They just fall into place. Of course, being part of the Golden State Bonsai Federation, which at that time was rocking and rolling. I mean, we were, big stuff. We had a great convention. We had 87 clubs. We were able to pull in demonstrators like Kimura or Mitsuya or Kobayashi, and Suzuki, and a whole bunch of people. It was just right place at the right time and that's kind of the reason why I got to Japan. Japan was kind of closed as far as the bonsai world. It evolved around them.
And when did you go? What year did you go to Japan?
I went to Japan 1980, 81, 82, in that period there.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 1990, 91, and 92.
Okay.
Okay, so I started in 80, so it was about 10 years. But
So did you get busier when you came back from Japan, or were you already busy prior to going to the apprenticeship?
I was busy. I was actually, I decided to calm it down when I came back from Japan. Because there's an assumption. You go to Japan and you study professional bonsai, even though I didn't go for the full apprenticeship. I went for 2 years, not 5. And I also told my instructors, look, if you don't want to accept me, I understand. I'm not going to do this professionally. It's my hobby, and it's something that I'm fascinated by, but I'm just not going to have a nursery. I'm not going to sell my bonsais. I just to this day, I've always been a hobbyist. I've given thousands of trees away, but I never sold anything. But I have to consider myself a professional because I did do workshops. convention demos, and you get paid for that.
I was gonna ask, how do you, clarify that kind of murky water sometimes where somebody says they're a professional because they do something or not? How do you do that specifically with bonsai?
Yeah, specific because I didn't make my income from bonsai. It's just I derived money from it, and I did teach, but tree pruning was my occupation. I had to list that bonsai as my obsessive hobby. Yeah, but clarify, I did get paid, and as far as and I got free rides. I went to Europe, Spain, Italy.
Wow.
Did some help. I helped out in Japan for Suzuki Toru or Mitsuya and their demos. Get paid, but you get this national publicity.
Right, and that makes you more in demand, right?
Japanese, I am Japanese American, but of course they want to chronicle the fact that I was an American. So it's good for them.
Right.
And so when Japan, they found that the rest of the world was moving around without them. Bonsai in Europe, bonsai in the United States, bonsai in Puerto Rico and other places were zooming along, and because they didn't really open up to the public and their instructors, that they thought they better jump in because it's business in Japan, big business. So Europe was popular because there's no import laws. There's no, here we got agricultural rules that you can't import black pines or anything else. But Europe didn't have that. So it was a good business partner. They could ship stuff over to Europe and people make a lot of money. So when the Japanese offered the opportunity to Californians, they saw it as just not only being benevolent, they saw it as we can come here and give talks, lectures, demonstrations, make some money, and maybe somehow sell you a pot or something that is allowable. So I mean, it's just my opinion, but that's just what I thought was the underlying reason why it opened up all of a sudden. I did my part. I became the president of the Golden State Bonsai Federation. And who should we bring to our convention? I can bring in Mitsuya, or I can bring in Suzuki Toru. Start name dropping, and I was part of the Hawaiian group, so we brought in Mitsuya and Suzuki Toru and others. And I said we can get them almost free. They'll come. They like Hawaii, and Hawaiians are really taking care of Japanese when they go to Hawaii, rather than coming to California, let alone Columbus, Ohio, or something. They have some fun, eat some sashimi. So I got these people in, and it became like my worth in Japan zoomed up. Finish or nothing. And when you finish, and I was still nothing, and you come back and. But I was like I was 42 years old when I started. Most apprentices, you start from like 17, 18 years old.
Right.
But I outworked all them young guys. I was physically fit, and I also had, I knew what a pine was. Young guys,
yeah, head start.
High school, they don't know anything. You actually got to be like their parent.
Yeah, I've heard that from multiple people. Like you go into an apprenticeship as like almost an infant, and then you learn the ways of the world through that lens, right?
That's right. And the instructor really doesn't teach you that much.
Right.
It's the senpai, the senior apprentice will teach the junior apprentices. And that's where all the discipline comes from, and all the technical work. And then I also realized that the Japanese aren't necessarily good teachers.
In what way?
Well, here, the onus is on the teacher to be a good teacher. If you don't get it, the teacher takes upon themselves to work with you and help you and teach you the lesson that you didn't get. And the onus is on you to be a good student. Masters do masterful work.
Right.
Exactly explain it to you, and they don't even know how to explain it to you. They just do things that are great.
Is it that learned by watching and taking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. If you don't get it, you better get that plane ticket home. You ain't gonna last long. I was encouraged to ask questions. Just observe, and you can figure it out. And I had, after 10 years of working in my profession, I thought a vast knowledge on how Japanese black pine grow and how to deal with them. But of course, it's microclimate. So you go to Japan, then you have to adjust. It's common sense. If you're in the Tohoku area, it can get quite cold in the mountains.
Yep.
But pines don't really grow that well. They're more like the white pines and red pines are there. And on the sea coast and the more temperate areas, then the black pines will grow. The Japanese had a hard time. Japanese tree pruning professionals, they come here to California. is you learn by rote. You learn the same thing over and over and over again until it's automatic. Then it's hard to adjust. You go to LA, there is no technical winter.
Yeah.
No, it's winter because it's just shorter days. Even more on the end, like, those pines are weak, so you have to worry about it, because growing all the time doesn't mean the thing is stronger. It's just it's weaker. It's like both of you need 6 hours of sleep at night at least, to generate. If you can live with just 2 or 3 hours of sleep every night, but you'll be like a walking zombie.
Yeah, the production value goes way down.
So you got to be careful in Hawaii because the plants never have a rest.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's funny you talk about Hawaii. My wife, I told you she's from Japan. She applied for 3 PhD programs. It was Hawaii, here, and Madison, Wisconsin. She visited Madison, Wisconsin, said it's too cold, too small of a town, not enough Japanese people. We were this close to going to Hawaii, but then we realized it's quite expensive. I didn't know about the bonsai scene. I knew there was a pretty well-established club down there, but I was like, I don't think I could bring my trees with me, as it's an island. You have to do all these things. You have to fly there. Ohio, you can drive there, no problem, right? And from your experience, how, even to now, if how is the scene in Hawaii? Is it still promoting well, or is it still kind of just there and doing its thing?
It's kind of just there. It hit a low period,
Okay.
For several reasons. One of the big ones was because of COVID.
Yeah.
Meeting, and then all of a sudden, they had, like in Oahu and Honolulu area, there was the Okinawa Festival that was every Labor Day in the Queen Kapiolani Park. My wife and I went there like 30 years in a row. And Hawaiian Bonsai Association had a exhibition, but it was in a tent. The whole fair was a series of tents. And in those days, the Japanese Americans were very prominent in Hawaiian bonsai, and all the islands. But one reason why bonsai was on a decline, because all the old timers were passing away.
Yeah.
Everybody I knew, all the senseis, I knew like at least 6 or 7, and they all died. And so it's tragic, you get to meet people and then they're gone. But it's slowly starting to come back. The Hawaiian Bonsai Association is starting back up again with another exhibition.
Good.
So they can, they have a called ABC program. They when people come to the exhibition and people want to learn, and they have these once a year classes. You pay, X amount of dollars, you get like 12 lessons. Different people will teach you different things, whether it's repotting or pruning, or basics of bonsai. That was part of my role, because I was, you have to watch it, because I've been all over the place doing all kind of stuff. So on one hand, it was very wonderfully exhausting.
Right.
And if you two talk bad about me, I'll find out. But I got people all over the place.
Never. We would never. No.
Kevin's talking bad about you. But anyway, Hawaii is on the kind of the rebound.
Good.
But to me, it's going to take a long time to replace the old senseis.
Right. And that's the thing. Like Ryan and I, we both have been a part of starting the first bonsai club ever at the Ohio State University. And that's where we're thinking too, is like, how do we keep this going on without us being here, in regards to it living on past our time at this university? And
have you heard of the Golden State Bonsai Federation Teacher Development Program?
No, what's that about?
Well, it's just, of course, I was the chair of that committee, and I was very interested in bonsai basics, because how to generate interest to keep a club alive. You need new people,
right? Fresh blood, yeah.
I found one thing. We had, I said, 87 clubs, and then you go to all the clubs, and they're teaching different basics. I said, I don't think you have a teaching style. But basics are basics. There are 5 basic styles according to the Japanese. I consider bonsai as a Japanese term, so there's a Japanese nuance to how they approach these trees. China has theirs, Vietnam has theirs, South Asia has theirs. So you can't talk about 5 basic styles, because they're talking about, bonsai as we do it here in the United States is pretty much based on the Japanese model. As opposed to, let's say, some philosophical approach from China or in other areas more of a tropical thing, or in Vietnam with Honan Bo, which is it's like a gigantic version of the Japanese psyche, the trees and rocks and landscape. It could be like 20 feet long. People bring in sections.
You need a crane.
I don't know what this is, but you'll find, how do you define these things? I said, well, I consider like not apples and oranges, but it's like music. And then there's nuances of jazz or classical. So I said, this is all aesthetically pruned trees in a pot. No matter what country. But then, it depends on which country, which influence. So the Japanese model has 5 basic styles. The foam upright, the inform upright, the slant, half cascade, and full cascade. 6. And I go to some places, they got 8 basic styles. So there's only 5. I don't know who made that up 200-300 years ago, but we abide by that.
Right.
Basics, so the tree can't be any taller than 3 feet. By definition.
And so you helped create this program, or you had established it?
Well, I had name recognition at the time. I was the president of the Golden State Bonsai Federation, and I had been an instructor at a lot of these clubs. So I knew a lot of the people. So we hammered it out. I got all the instructors together, and I had 5 seminars. 5 districts in the Golden State Bonsai Federation. So I had a get together in each district, and I brought all the senseis in. And look, we're going to duke it out here. Like I don't care if you talk about what plant or whatever, but so there's 5 basic styles. The half cascades, the hybrid. Geez, this don't get. I forgot the name of the term. It's an Italian term. I'll probably say it wrong. Fibonacci or.
Oh, the Fibonacci, yeah.
Yeah, one guy was teaching that. I said, look, that's cool, but it's kind of really overwhelming for a new student that has a 1-gallon can in front of them.
Right.
Dumb it down. So we have 5 basic styles. And the goal was to keep the instruction simple. Just don't get too fancy in this thing. And then there's basic tools. You don't need the Masakuni tools when you first start.
Right. It's very expensive.
Just got a pair of garden scissors or electrical pliers or something. And we're not going to use coat hangers, but they can get you wire kind of cheaply, but just to wire the main trunk and a 1-gallon can. Don't take it out of the can. Don't repot it. Just if you take it out of the can, people do that, and then they work on the tree, but it dries out the root system. If you repot it, you got to cut the root system. Like teaching a new student, we're going to do all the technical things, and we're going to repot, and this is like having open heart surgery.
Exactly. Yeah.
How the heck can you, as a novice, keep a tree alive when you got to water it every day? Keep it in the can. You can go almost a whole week sometimes without watering it. Just if you can't keep that alive in 1 year, then maybe the handwriting is on the wall. Maybe that is not what you wanted.
Right.
So we have the bonsai basics, and then we didn't write the curriculum.
Okay.
Like BCI, ABS, they all had their own curriculums. Very sophisticated things. Educators wrote this stuff out. Lesson 1, lesson 2. I said our principal thing was just keep it simple, and we broke it down so it is simple. And then we said that next level, after you get past the first year, then you can start repotting, because then it requires more tools. It requires more dedication to more diligence in watering and care and sunlight. And then so let's not use the sailors because they snap.
Yeah.
They're very brittle. Having said that, I saw this guy in Sacramento. He was a guest from Japan, a headliner. He's going to grab this big branch and then bend it down to here. So we're all sitting there, oh man, waiting for that big crack. He grabbed that thing, he turned it into like knots. Unbelievable.
Wow.
No, not even John Lockett could do that. But he says, the way you feel the trunk, you can find, the lifeline, you can twist this thing and say, oh, yeah, wow. But, we don't want novices to do that. And
right. You're just asking for
plants that can be neglected and stay alive. Figure the juniper is probably the cheapest plant to get, first available. And they can take drying out, they can take too much water, no fertilizer.
So the Percumbens Nano, is that one you guys use a lot? That specific variety?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one you could throw pretty much the whole sink and everything else with it.
Yeah, that's right. Then we had we taught the instructors, those who would, abide by what we're trying to do. In teaching, it was the Bonsai Basics Teacher's Guide, we wrote down maybe 40 rules for you to try to abide by. Even if you have a group of 10 students, you need to instructor and a half, you need an assistant. We broke it down to one instructor can handle 6, at the most 7 students.
If it's very hands-on in terms of the activities.
And you do it. So we said, don't let the instructor do it. Elderly people, sometimes they need a little hand, if they have weak hands, you need to assist them a little bit.
Right.
We just says, on the slide, you could let, you think that they're bending it, but you have your hand on that thing and you're doing the work.
Right. Just allowing them to feel.
The work. Look at what I accomplished here. Little kids, but so actually, this is it. This is the sophisticated document, Golden State Bonsai Federation, Bonsai Basics Teacher's Guide.
We'll have to see if we can find that online.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Well, I'm not even sure the Golden State Bonsai Federation exists anymore, but they've fallen on hard times because of the pandemic. But this is on their website. I don't know what they're, how do you get them, but it's the Golden State Bonsai Federation, and it's listed as the Basics Teacher's Guide.
Oh wow!
What happened was it became very popular because it fit in with there's a guy named Thomas Zane. He was out of Florida.
Mm-hmm. He
had a really sophisticated program, and all the stuff that was on tape and everything, and booklets and stuff. Mm-hmm. So this fit right in with what they're trying to do. This is how to teach what they have. So I interviewed thousands of people that dropped out. How come you dropped out? And some say, well, it's just more expensive than I thought.
Yeah.
So we said, well, we'll put in here, these are the basic tools that you need just to get started. Mm. Some people thought that the instruction was just too complicated, which is true. And then some people went from one club to the other and it was taught totally something different. So we need to standardize what is basic.
Mm. Right.
And if you go from this thing went around, I got a correspondence from Sweden, one from Peru. Mm-hmm. Hey, they enjoyed this, and this is we're by ourselves, and we use this as the guide of how to start our bonsai basics program. Mm-hmm. Well, we found that a lot of students were just isolated in the audience, and they don't know what's going on. Especially in California at that time, we're going through a transition. It was actually a civil war in clubs.
Really,
so those that were under the contemporary umbrella, mm-hmm. they wanted the Kimuras.
Okay.
For a local club, it was going to cost you $15,000. It breaks the bank.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of people just want to have coffee and socialize and
right. Social hour, right?
Goofy stuff. I mean, you need these people too, because we have shows. Mm-hmm. Got to sit at the door, or someone's got to set up the backdrops. But then there was a big friction there. So I didn't have the answer, but I asked all the advanced people, can you just break off, stay with the club, but form your own study group within the club. Hmm. You as individuals put in your own money, and then you can, if you want to pay in your own little thing, $500 per person per year, but then you could bring in, a high profile person, mm-hmm. A basic student didn't need the top professional from Japan to come and talk to you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The best things, and I'm not sure what's like in Ohio, but there are clubs that just a whole plethora of school teachers. Mm. I went through the system, picked out all the school teachers and all the trainers and people. One person was a trainer of how to work an X-ray machine. Mm. They're used to dealing with people and mm-hmm. personalities. They know how to deal with a aggressive pruner and a real conservative, shy person. So I said, you guys teach the basics. And I'll move all the old timers that didn't want to teach the basics. Well, this is too simple for you. You're great. Why can't you teach the advanced people? Or we'll honor you in a certain way. Mm-hmm. With headliners and workshop leaders at our conventions, and let the school teachers teach.
That's a really good point. Yeah, we've been trying to think about setting up a kind of a mentorship or beginner classes because, as you just stated, that's how you retain people to come back because they feel like they're being heard and listened to and taught, right? As opposed to, go on your own. Yeah. Good luck, And
I'm very not vindictive. But geez, we're not going to fall into the party line. Do what you want. It's your club. But when you start dying, well, I'll be right there. So I told you so. And trying these people out. This plan I had for 10 years I've been using. I told them it wasn't a good plan 10 years ago, and it's still not a good plan. It's like sometimes you gotta get over yourself.
When you were
great people, I got them on my side.
Mm-hmm.
Bonsai instructors here, and then they got their clubs, and then they got other people in line, because if they can do it, you can do it. The man named Tatsumi Kanoshita in Monterey. He is the last of the whole generation. It's the last one standing. All these old Japanese American senseis. He's still alive. I think he had a bad stroke, but I think he's still teaching in somewhat. But he was an instructor for like 3 or 4 of the old Japanese clubs that never joined the federation.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'd like to get them in the federation. He says, "Well, just leave it up to me. I'll get them in."
With the federation, did it also encompass the full, at that time when the federation was made and you were in such standings within the federation, was there still predominantly only Japanese speaking clubs at that time, or had those kind of say again?
Just the opposite.
Okay.
The Japanese American clubs, maybe, just as a crude guess, maybe 60% that were all Japanese speaking didn't join the federation. And I'm not saying it was kind of like racism in reverse, whatever it was, but it was like, I had to understand where they were coming from. These people were interned, imprisoned.
Right.
Hey, you got everything taken away from you. We're going to do something Japanesey. We're going to do bonsai, we're going to do ikebana. We're going to keep it for ourselves. So they really didn't open up, and then a lot of them were self-defeating because they just spoke Japanese. They said, "You're not going to get any new people.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to die." And I was looked at this as a savior. I was sitting there in these club meetings, and I couldn't understand Japanese. I said for 10 years trying to glean some information.
Mm.
And then it came time. Well, you're the future of the club. I'm out of here. I said, "Look, you want me only at the end because you're getting desperate." And I says, I'd rather do this stuff on a federation level.
Right.
So, but I was also chair of the history project for the Golden State Bonsai Federation. But it was our 25th anniversary 20 years ago.
Okay.
45 years old now, but we did a 25-year commemorative thing, and I did a history, but only the 2 years prior to the formation of the federation and 2 years after. You can go history. It's like 10 years after, 20 years after. But I just felt the formative years. Who was there? What was the thought process? And document all their. They had notes for these board meetings, and what was the principles involved, and typical United States kind of thing. They had one club, one vote. And they had issues along the way, because there were some clubs like San Diego and Kofukai in Los Angeles that had 400 members.
Wow.
We had a club in Crescent City that had 10. But, one vote. So it's like, wow, there was a open rebellion here, and there was this over there. So you never get out of the politics and stuff.
Right. That's what we're realizing too, just either at the university level or, city level, public. It's
It was important because as part of this history we're talking about.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The history of the Golden State Bonsai Federation, but it wasn't a history of bonsai in California. And again, I say this loosely. I prefer to think that bonsai as a hobby started in California. Because I'm a Californian. It's just I noticed when, like in Minnesota, but the instructor was To Sawamaru from Palo Alto. And Masi Mizumi went to Minnesota and other places. There's a Japanese American presence. But like in Arizona, so Leroy Fuji, it's also a product of the internment, people being dissipated after that point.
Right.
They've all been interned in Wyoming or Utah or someplace, but they don't want to come back to California, so they wound up in Chicago or Ohio or Detroit. Japanese Americans were there basically before.
Right.
A lot kind of went to Arizona, but and there was. Are you familiar with the Japanese American old timers? Any of the more prominent names?
Such as I was gonna say, there's Harry Harao, Ben Oki.
Yeah.
So there's a gentleman in Portland. What's his name? Masa.
Yeah.
I can't think of his name. He was up in Portland, and then Yuji Yoshimura, all about that. But in regards to, you probably know so many, you do know so many more names in regards to that. How did that relate to you being able to kind of project all this knowledge? Because you've had this basic knowledge of post-World War II bonsai, right? Because you've seen it, you've been a part of it. And then going into being in the part of the Federation, did that experience help you kind of guide how you wanted to help the clubs in that way?
Yes, I'm very manipulative. I like to think of myself as always with a plan. I was the president of the Bonsai Federation from 2002 2003. It's actually a 10-year process.
Wow.
Who the hell want to be a president of federation? You have to be second vice president for 2 years.
Okay.
Then you're first vice president for 2 years, and then you're president for 2 years, and then you have 4 years of past presidency as being on the board. But I chose when I wanted to be nominated for the second vice president's position, because I knew that it was the big changeover right there from a Japanese American influence to a non-Japanese American influence. All the old timers were gone. Generation, there's only about 5 of us, the third generation Japanese American. So it's like, why? Because of my father was a gardener, everybody else's father was a gardener, right. My mother was a house cleaner. All my female friends, or sister, they didn't want to be house cleaners. So I didn't want to do what my father did. It's actually very bad to say this, but I was embarrassed by what he did. Well, he might want to be a fireman or somebody good. He's just a gardener.
Right.
All of our parents are gardeners. They're all poor. So what does your father do? He's a gardener.
He does stuff.
He's a kid. It's like in the 50s, there was a TV program called Dragnet.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. Yep.
It was it was something. It was a government thing. So it was a government G-Man.
I was gonna say spy as a spy show, right?
No, it was actually a detective thing in Los Angeles.
That's what I was thinking. The other, yeah.
But they were called G-Men. So what's your father though? He's a G-Man. Assuming he's a government man, but he was a gardener. But then none of us, and luckily in the Japanese American community, still a recently immigrated type of community where the Issei's were the first generation. They immigrated, our grandparents, 1990, 1900. And then
so your parents were second generation?
Yes, they were born in Sacramento.
Okay.
So they were Nisei's, the second generation. That's basically the group that got interned.
Right.
Then within that, there's a subcategory called Kibei. So my mother was technically a Kibei. Here, lived in Japan for her grammar school, junior high school, and then brought back here. It was just hard times as being in a farm community. They didn't own farms. They're like, work for farm groups. But sometimes you just can't make it. Or in those days, we had to remember there was World War I, the Depression. So a lot of times, my grandfather died, when he was here. My grandmother had to go back to Japan, so brought the kids back.
Okay.
And so that's a Kibei. John Naka's a Kibei. Hiro Harau's a Kibei. Born here, but lived part of their life in Japan. And my generation, there were only about 5 or 6 of us that really took up bonsai seriously. There were anomalies. Some people like Roy Nagatoshi from Silmar, California, Mel Ikeda. I just saw him a couple of weeks ago. And myself, there was Lindsay Shiba, and a couple others, and they might have just been right after us, but we're the only ones. So
why do you think that is?
I did there, hey, I went to you, so let me hang out at your clubs, and Japan was, hey, this guy's a novelty. He's Japanese American. Maybe we can, use him as a student.
Right.
I had an education, so I was fairly articulate, and they wanted me to come back and share what I learned in Japan. So I wasn't shy or something like that, and I wasn't greedy. I'm gonna keep all these things to myself in my own business, and but being Japanese American, and then we had unwritten laws in the Golden State Bonsai Federation. Not even bylaws and policy procedures. It's unwritten. So one was every other president had, you had to switch Northern California, Southern California, typical political thing. It wasn't our bylaws. It was just you elect somebody from LA 1 year, 2-year term, and the next guy had to be Northern California.
Interesting.
Also, the same thing was very unusual. Every other president had to be Japanese American.
Oh wow, that's quite a designation. Yeah.
And the early days, the first 2 weren't.
Okay.
The first one was Jim Barrett, president. But these are a little bit more, in those days, more the contemporary bonsai people, but they were all students of prominent Japanese people. So
when you say contemporary, I know you talked about the Japanese American style, and then where did the contemporary start, and where did the Japanese style, American style kind of not fade out, but when did it become
I guess
something
they
else?
used the word wrong, but just when the Jim Barrett's and Jim Zimmerman was the second president. There was a Melba Tucker that was like the fourth president.
Mm-hmm.
But they all studied under prominent Japanese American bonsai artists, so they were like the new generation.
Okay.
And but they abided by the Japanese code of conduct.
Right.
You honor the sensei. You do this. You do that. You donate your time. You show up at the conventions. You support. We went to early conventions. You go there. We had like 400 people per convention in those days. But all the old Japanese masters were there, and with their wives. And they sit in the hallway. You walk by. Hey, John. Hey, Harry. Hey, Ben. Just walk down the road. Like about 30 of them there. 20 of them. So the thing was that they can show up, then you could show up. It helps the convention with hotel rooms, registration.
Right.
And you support your sensei.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I got to know everybody.
Mm-hmm.
These old timers, man, they drank a lot, so you pay your dues. You crawl out of the bar and on the night. Oh God, it was fun. And then me and Mel and a few others, we kept the tradition. We had our own little hospitality spot in the hallway after midnight in the lobby of the hotel, and we go on long hallways, go to your rooms, but then we find a little cul-de-sac area, bring out the beer, the wine, and sake and other things. And a lot of people like to have fun and like drinking bonsai. Boy, we were rocking and rolling there.
Oh yeah, I've heard a lot of stories from Chase.
And then I said I've been on a lot of programs with Chase. And then
do you remember when you two first met, or like around the time when you started like seeing each other more?
I would say it was about 30 years ago.
Okay.
He was one of the earlier ones that came from outside of California to be on our program. Him and Bill Albanus and a few others. But I got to know them because I was on the program and they were on the program. And the program, you tend to hang around together.
Right. Commiserating all
things,
right?
I was especially when I was president. It's a volunteer organization, volunteer position. Of course, the Federation gives you a couple $100 to get a cheese plate or something for a little reception. It's woefully inadequate. The whole thing was a joke. Spent about $40,000 of my own money, president, for free volunteer organization. I had to travel. I made a point to travel every club. So every weekend, get on an airplane, drive up there, or do something.
A lot of time put in.
And possibly deal with, like if you have a satellite organization in Ohio and you got clubs out in Cincinnati or some other place, and they got issues, and if you don't know what they are. So I went to every club. What's the issue? I'm the president. I can solve 90% of your things right now. I'm standing right here.
Right. You're like the enforcer.
Yeah. Well, you need it, then I'll solve it. And then, instead of letting it fester or get caught up in some bureaucracy, it's just, you need insurance. I call the insurance chair. And, can you get this done like today? It's a simple thing. In those days, it was like we had just turned over to an insurance nightmare. A lot of our places, high school gyms and stuff, they needed liability insurance.
Okay.
The local clubs couldn't afford it, so we got one for the Golden State Bonsai Federation as the umbrella organization, and you can, get it from us.
Right.
So but I got to know all these old timers, everybody. So it was like John Naka. Everybody wants to know John Naka. You read about it, or you read his books. On stage, he could, I took in almost all his demonstrations, and I took as many workshops as I could. He could sing, dance, draw, work on the tree, tell jokes, carry on a lucid conversation on bonsai aesthetics at the same time.
Wow.
I've done about 500 demonstrations. I can't walk and talk, man. I got, let me do this and then ask the question after I finish this little phase there. Just John Knockins is incredible. But I found out, I cheated. I used to talk, and then I would cut every, on stage. The plant's already on stage. And I would cut all the branches off that I didn't want and stuck them back in the tree. So, and I had that, like the detail wiring, or if I did detail wiring, I did that because you can't see it from the audience. So I'm just sitting there and flopping all these things out of the tree. Wow, this guy's fast and it's good.
That's a good trick.
So I just pulled out branches I already cut. And then, I just put the big wire on the trunk and did that because, but I could talk at the same time then. I prefer doing that because I just don't like instant bonsai. I don't like on stage. It's a kind of a contemporary thing right now, in my opinion, but a lot of people have this just beautiful work when you finish.
Mm-hmm. It seems to be a thing, like you said, a lot of people nowadays are expected to instruct as they are doing their craft, right? Or their art, where right. And it's almost like that balance or dance, like you're talking about, where it seems like everyone is supposed to be able to do that now. And when do you think John brought that on as far as the thing that was of necessity?
He didn't bring it on. He was just so good that he was just, no one can even match him.
Okay.
People have tried to do both, and it was a crappy conversation or a lousy finished product. So sometimes you cheat. Sometimes you did what I did. Sometimes you have a lot of assistants. They do the work, you do the talking.
Right, right.
Or conversely, these old Japanese American guys, they were kind of, some were the Kibe, some of them speak English as well as they wanted to. So they did the work, and they had somebody, it wasn't interpreting, you just kind of verbalizing what's being done on stage.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Play by play, right?
Yeah, so that's another way of doing it.
Mm.
I've only met one person like John Naka, that's for sure. But that's part of the bonsai basics too. I observed a lot of these old timers and how they taught workshops.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them, 99.9% were male, and there is a little sexism involved.
Yeah.
They have a workshop of 10 people, and for some reason, maybe I was punished, but I was always like number 10. So you're sitting there for like 2 hours, and by the time person comes by, or some people actually do sketches of your tree. Geez, I'm sitting there and watching the guy, listening to him, they sketching a tree, and then once in a while you come across one person that looked like Marilyn Monroe. And the instructor spent like a half hour with that person. God dang, I'm still waiting at the end. So we just said bonsai basic. This is, we made a rule. You're the instructor. You can only spend 5 minutes per student on the first time around.
Right. Right.
That's a good idea.
Get started, get a feel for the person. If you got an assistant, then you let the assistant kind of help. I said, but you, the instructor and the assistant, can't do the tree for the student.
Right.
Got to do it. So we can't have two instructors in the same room. It's like they cross paths, and you should bend it left. You should bend it right.
Yeah.
We can't have that kind of confusion.
Mm-hmm. And
we definitely said, I used to talk to all the assistants ahead of time. You cannot interject your own personal opinion. Just implement what the student and instructor came up with.
Mm.
It's going to be an informal upright style, then that's what it is. As an assistant, I think it looks better as a cascade. Can't do it. So that's part of this document here, how to do these things. Like I said, John Naka was exceptional. So it's just like you can never beat him.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also nice to know what perfection is, what the ultimate is.
Right, right.
Japanese model. So go to Japanese professional shows. You see what the ultimate is supposed to be here. And then there's I used to joke, you heard this guy Marco Ibanez?
Ibanez, yeah.
Very popular. He was in California a lot of times, and I sat there in my workshops, and he would have a workshop. Look at my group, all the old bald-headed guys. Like rigor mortis are sitting on these guys, Then look at Marco's room, all these pretty young women in there. God dang, what gives here, I just said what the perfect male hunk is: 5'4", Japanese American, balding. You're the wrong sex. You're too tall, too short, too heavy.
Mm-hmm.
But once you know what perfection is, you know what you strive for. You may not reach it.
Right.
But John Naka was somebody that everybody wanted to know, and he had his. He hammed it up. He liked to be popular. I remember at San Diego at the time. I really got to know him well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always in his class. He thought that I was competent. And you know what you're doing. I'll just help somebody else because I'm running out of time. But it was in San Diego, and it was a morning workshop. So there was like 6 of us doing morning workshops, and they all ended at noon.
Mm-hmm.
So you're all dirty, and mine was on pine, so I had to go to the bathroom, wash my hands. John Naka was in the bathroom at the same time. Oh, cool. And then we walked out, and he said, I remember there was like 8 women from Guadalajara, Mexico, were there, basically just to see John.
Mm.
And he came out, and he was like a rock star. Boy, everybody had their cameras out, and they wanted to take pictures with him, and John was waving his hand. God damn, no, they shoved me aside, get out of the way. And I looked at John, I called him. I said, John, your zipper's open. And he wore a white shirt, so the white shirt was sticking out of his zipper. I was like, oh God. He just laughed. He laughed at himself.
That's good. That's good.
He says, well, okay, I'm getting kind of old, so every time I see you, just check my zipper for me. Every convention I walk by, you're okay, John. It looks okay. And then, we both like to joke around, so we took it further. I said, instead of just looking at the zipper, I'm going to bow. Check it out. We're laughing like this inside joke. But I said, man, you really are a true Japanese bonsai person. You bow low to the master and stuff. Zipper. Quite on, every time I saw him, we started laughing. This inside joke. And you get to know somebody very well.
Right.
Are you familiar with the LA people? You mentioned a few. Well, Ben Oki used to travel around the United States, and pretty much he was like John's first number one assistant at that time.
Yeah.
There he got his reputation because of Mr. California Juniper. He went to the desert, and he brought everybody out there. But there was a guy named Henry Iba. There was Richard Ota, Frank Goya, Shikia, Mas Moriguchi, Ben Suzuki. There was Kaju Neda. Well, the reason I bring that up, and there was a George Yamaguchi, but to honor the old timers when I was president, they were just getting shuffled. The contemporary artists were just trashing them. This is old country bumpkin stuff. If I got that tree, I can improve their work. Terrible. We have your right to your opinion, and then a lot of contemporary artists that went to Japan after I did, they come back as rock stars. And then they have their own clubs, their own groups, and they want to fix American bonsai. And maybe you are, but you just can't trash the old ways. I had to put a label on it. It's folk art.
Right.
Pure piece. It's lovely, but don't say it was a bunch of junk. It was just what they did in the 50s and 60s and the 70s.
Right. It's what they had at their disposal, right? They had to utilize like you said, like they had use of nails and so many things,
People, some get magazines from Japan, but there was no one classically studying in Japan in those days.
Right.
So they did the best they could. But then we're talking about some of the old timers and then their style. It's not even a style. I looked at all these trees, all these people in their collections, even in those Sunset publications, the old books, you see it's old style. What that means to me is that they started the tree, with good hobby intentions, and then they just sometimes they didn't water for a week. Sometimes fertilized for a year, but they kept the tree alive. They just knew, maybe tomorrow they're gonna be dead if I don't water it. They had clay soils and garden soils, the worst horticulture possible. But in clay soils, you water too much, it stays too wet. You let it dry, it's bone dry, and then it cracks. You know what to do. So you look at all the old trees, you can see that the bonsai basic was there. But then if you let it grow without pampering it, then it starts to develop a bigger head, like on the pines.
Right.
Ours, it's inferior because people, it's a spoke, a whorl where the branches come out. It is because they come from the same spot, but therefore you get a knuckle or swelling. The old style, there's a branch here, branch here, branch here, and then they all start moving up to get to the sunlight. Still had a big head, but it didn't get the knuckle.
So is that left, right, front, back kind of deal?
That's how I started. And from there, they just couldn't work on the tree weekly. They work on it when they could.
Right.
Because of poverty and feeding the family. And that's part of the old style. And then there's always a tremendous negative space. There's always the north side. People don't take that much in those days. In bonsai, you can, contemporary ways, grab something from the left and bring it to the right. Something from the right, bring it just to form this formal cap. In the old days, if you don't work on it too much, the sun side will dominate, and then the north side of the tree will shade out and get space there. So it's like a common look. You look at all these old trees; they all kind of look the same. It wasn't like they all got together in some conference in 1952 and decided this is the style. Here's what we're going to do. But because they all kept them alive so long, they started looking kind of similar.
Right.
Very, very individual. It wasn't like cone heads or, I don't quite. I studied the contemporary style in Japan. is a contemporary artist. A very good one. I appreciate what I see, but I also grew up in the old Japanese American community. And I looked at the old plants, and to me, they look a little more natural.
Right.
Do
you have a preference between the contemporary?
I chose the old style because that's something that as a tree pruner, I wanted my trees to look like trees.
Right, aesthetically, yeah.
I don't want perfectly like the redwood behind you. There's going to be a bias where the big tree is and how the little ones start to move around to get to the light. Or even like the contemporary style, there's the gin tops. They just make a little dead piece on the top.
Right.
On a redwood, it's impossible. Unless you got a 1,000-year-old tree, it's gonna turn into a candelabra after a while.
That's really true.
You depose the dictator, anarchy happens. Everybody comes up to fight for the lead.
That's a good way to explain that.
That's a really straight to the point.
So, I got tired of seeing the quick fix of the gin top.
Yeah.
I might, if I did that, I would actually take that spoke of new branches and then just keep one, and then treat it, really close to the dead piece. So that obviously you don't want to treat it all like that. I want it to be reasonably vertical. And then on a redwood, there's always another basal sprout underneath that one lead that you started, and it's even closer to the middle of the tree. So eventually I get back to a single top, but the dead piece is obviously it's the story. That's what happened, and this is how nature, overcomes that. The will to live. Go on. But the contemporary style, there's a lot of wood carving, a lot of fancy work, and I appreciate that. But I kind of turned against the California juniper too. This is the old days, it was just crude work, but it just, the deadwood wasn't polished, but that's subjective.
Right.
It's something from the desert. Today's trees are so beautiful, perfectly capped, almost super fed, lush green. I said, how can all this deadwood exist underneath this thing? And the top is, I'm 76 years old, man. If I got me an Elvis Presley toupee and start walking around town, it look kind of funny. You got this nice green top on, this is a desert thing. That's the survival, and the sand and the wind and the blistering heat is, and also the top is less green. I said, how do you justify that? I can't. But in a contemporary world, that's what's nice. Right. Beautiful work, beautiful craftsmanship.
Right.
It's just not for me.
It keeps people coming back because they see that beauty, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, my trees, I donated them, and I donated a lot of old ones. I know they're gonna all be contemporized. Detail wiring. I wired initially, the main trunk. Or like I got these old pines from the old timers. I had like 100 of them. That were from the 50s. Wow. I didn't want to. I kept them as they were. I mean, I of course I pruned and try to make them back into some form of proportion. But I never changed the flavor of them, and I try to keep the personality of the original artist in there. Yeah. But people, I donated my trees, and when some of the comments were, "This is great stuff." And people came from all over California for this auction that was done in last year.
Yeah, I did read about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's gave me a little fame and glory. I'm not benevolent, but if I found out they made with the sale, it was a 2-part sale. The best bonsais were first, and then like 6 months later they had for the dry goods, the pots, the stands. And I know the plants themselves, they auctioned out. The first one was like $150,000.
Wow.
I think that I had a lot of signature pots from Japan, a lot of rosewood stands, a lot of everything. I would think that all total, plus the collection kept a lot of stuff for themselves. Right. But I imagine like a $500,000 donation.
Wow, that's amazing.
If I knew it was going to myself, sold them, and I just stopped. So I was mentor if I can, but this is probably the last public thing you're going to see of me, whether it's a Zoom meeting, but that's it. I also believe you don't do bonsai, you shouldn't be talking about it. Right. Things to offer, if you want to talk about, this is the last chance to learn something about the old timers in general in California. Some of the California people still know there's 3 people still alive down there in the old school: Frank Goya, Shignia, and Richard Ota. Okay. There was 5 of them before. They called them the Iron Men. It was Ben Oki and Harry Hara, but Ben and Harry have since passed. Right. Like 3 guys left, and they're all 100. I just saw Frank Goya, like 2 weeks ago.
How's he doing?
He's doing pretty good. I quite recognize you, but he's look like he's pretty sharp still as far as what he wants to do.
Right.
You know, and Richard Ota is really sharp. Got to be in his late 90s. We had a exhibition in Japantown. I went down for the last 10 years. I belonged to it's called the Nampu Kai Club. It's a John Naka special club. You know, it's students that became teachers. I guess, but I was asked to come down and show a tree. Sure, if it's the Nampu Kai, I will. You know, Richard Ota pulls up in his pickup truck. He's 98 years old. It's like, God dang, he's trucking around. Good for you. But Northern California, I think there's no one around now that can tell you all the old names.
Okay.
You know, because I was like the only one here. There was 4 guys down in LA, but there's a couple others that are the sons of some old timers. You know, they're very good. They're senseis of the club now, but I can't put them into the category of knowing the original history of these bonsai masters.
Right, it gets convoluted, right?
Yeah, in my area there was Bob Kato, Hiroshi Suzuki, Mitsu Mahara, Henry Matsutani, Riki Sumimoto, Jimmy Inodomi. And they had these nurseries. You know, a lot of them had nurseries in bonsai establishments, master nurseries too. But I got a chance to study workshops with every one of these guys.
Wow.
Only one I claimed as an instructor for me was Masa Musumi. And I did almost the unthinkable. I shouldn't have, but I said, and I asked, because in those days you do not train with other people, one person only. Insult to your instructor if you go study with somebody else. And John Naka only came up here like twice. You know, sometimes it's kind of territorial, and yet there's no Japanese Americans from Northern California going to Southern California. I think I was the only one that ever did things down there.
Oh, wow.
You know, because I want to establish myself as one of you too. So I went down there all the time. But Northern California, it was like, I asked Moss, is it okay if I, took workshops with other instructors? I said, I'm no knock on you, you're still my primary instructor, but I like to learn from, so-called John Hocker, other people, what they got to say. And he said, okay.
Wow.
And that point on, we traveled the whole world together, Japan together, we roomed together. We were like the original odd couple, but he was a very meticulous guy. I'm the t-shirt and shorts kind of guy. Hats on. And, he used to go to sleep like at 9 o'clock at night, and I was trying to sneak out the room and let's go party, let's go have some fun. And he'd wake me up at 5 in the morning, let's go eat breakfast. Oh, God, this guy snuck in at 3 o'clock in the morning. But he was a very dignified person, very proud. But that's something you learn as a Japanese American, especially these old time guys. They got too much pride. They you don't slight them, even if you didn't mean it. But man, they hold that grudge forever. So you just have to know these things and make a lot of enemies.
Do you think that pride comes from their experience of post-World War II and all the things that they had to, the grievances, or just their experience of how to stay safe and just keep this identity?
I think that was, that's part of it, but I think it still goes back to Japan. It's very male-oriented society, and there's a lot of one-upmanship, but there's respect. At the same time as I respected all these people, and everybody I mentioned, I actually had a chance to assist them in some demonstration, some workshop.
Right, like you said, yeah.
So you get to know everybody, and then I'm one of you, though I can't say I'm Japanese. In fact, I had to relabel how I think of myself. Japanese American is a nice term. Now I say I'm an American with Japanese ancestry.
Okay.
I live in Japan, but that's a foreign country, and even Japanese Americans of the second generation, so we don't think the same. They conform, they work hard. So man, I wasn't like a party animal, but I just, I got arrested, for fighting.
Okay.
I went to Vietnam, served there.
Okay.
But that's kind of like how your life changes and how you realize how short life is. And I was in infantry. I purposely make sure I signed the little, information sheets properly. This is, do you like firing guns? No. You like camping? No. are you kind of an aggressive guy? No. Well, what do you like? I said, I like typing. I was trying to be a quick typist in the Army, but I couldn't. I got shut out of that school, so I went to signal school. And long story short, I wound up in Vietnam because I got in a fight when I was in high school. Mom had to pick me up at police station. She didn't drive the car; I took the bus. A typical Japanese second generation woman. She apologized that she failed me because we were broke and had to steal a knife and cut this guy's head off. High school gym, the guy called me a Jap. I said, "That's it."
Wow.
Yeah. You can insult my mother. You can insult the way I look, my clothes, but don't call me a Jap or Jink or a goop. So all my life I got kind of reprimanded, but everybody's, even in the Army, I got reprimanded twice. Guys call you a gook. I said, look, I could die just like you.
Right.
The thing was, the company commander says, you got reported, so he had to do something. But he says, I understand, it's a racist thing, and so I never got promoted. I was a corporal, and basically a Spec 4, and I actually ran my division in the whole Central Highlands area in my job description, and it's supposed to be like 4 or 5 ranks higher. So he said, if I demote you, it's on your records. I just won't promote you. And, okay. I just made my, I don't know, it was $25 a month or something. That was it. But anyway, that's like, that dictates how I look at bonsai.
Right.
And I appreciate these old timers and what they went through. Appreciate the next generation of people that were not Japanese American, but they kind of fit into the mold of what the old timers were trying to do. Like I said, the Warren Hills, the Jim Barretts, the Larry Ragels. Up here we had John Planting, Bill Sullivan. There's a whole bunch of people that were more Japanese than I was. But I said I got a Japanese heritage, ancestry, but I lived in Japan, and that's a foreign country.
Hey, Bonsai Time Podcast listeners. This is your host Kevin saying thank you for listening. Make sure to stay tuned for part 2 being released next week. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like and leave a comment. Next week's episode will cover more of Dennis's journey in bonsai life and all things else. Remember to bonsai on and have fun. Today's